Alright, I have two books here on the Elder Scrolls. I have both Ruminations of the Elder Scrolls and Effects of the Elder Scrolls. So I'm going to start with Ruminations. Ruminations on the Elder Scrolls by Septimus Cygnus, College of Winterhold. Imagine living beneath the waves with a strong-sided blessing of most excellent fabric. Holding the fabric over your gills, you would begin to breathe, drink its warp and weft. Though the plant matter fibers imbue your soul, the wretched plankton would pollute the cloth until it stank to heavens of prophecy. This is one manner in which the scrolls first came to pass. But are we the sea, or the breather, or the fabric? Or are we the breath itself? Can we flow through the scrolls as knowledge flows through, being the water? Or are we the stuck morass of sea filth that gathers on the edge? Imagine again, this time but different. A bird, cresting the wind, is lifted by a gust and downed by a stone. But the stone can come from above, if the bird is upside down. Where, then, did the gust come from? And which direction? Did the gods send either? Or has the bird decreed their presence by her own mind-making? The all-sight of the scrolls makes a turning of the mind such that relative positions are absolute in their primacy. I ask you again to imagine for me. This time you are beneath the ground, a tiny acorn planted by some well-meaning elf maiden of the woodlands for her pleasure. You wish to grow, but fear what you may become, so you push off the water, the dirt, the sun, to stay in your hole. But it is in the very pushing that you become a tree, in spite of yourself. How did that happen? The acorn is kind of tree egg. The acorn is a kind of tree egg in this instance, and the knowledge is water and sun. We are the chicken inside the egg, but also the dirt. The knowledge from the scrolls is what we push against to become full-sighted ourselves. One final imagining before your mind closes from the shock of ever-knowing. You are now a flame, burning bright blue within a vast emptiness. In time you see your brothers and sisters, burnings of their own, in the distance, and along your side. A sea of pinpoints, a constellation of memories. Each burns bright, then flickers. Then two more take its place, but not forever, lest the void fills with rancid light that sucks the thought. Each of our minds is actually the emptiness, and the learnings of the scrolls are the pinpoints. Without their stabbing light, my consciousness would be as a vast nothingness, unknowing its emptiness as a void is unknowing of itself. But the burnings are dangerous, and must be carefully tended, and minded, and brought to themselves, and spread to their siblings. So, interesting, a bunch of really loopy metaphors about how the knowledge from the Elder Scrolls rests in your mind, or how it compares to what you are right now. Interesting. So I'm going to take that, just in case I happen to need it, and we're going to move on to Effects of the Elder Scrolls. Effects of the Elder Scrolls. It is widely known among scholars that the Elder Scrolls entail a certain hazard in their very reading. The mechanism of the effect has at present been largely unknown. Theories of hidden knowledge and divine retribution were the subject of idle speculation with little investigation. I, Justinius Apollonius, have undertaken to thoroughly document the ailments afflicted by the Elder Scrolls on their readers, though a unified theory of how they manifest continues to elude me, and remains a subject for future study. I have grouped the effects into four, finding that the avenue of experience depends largely upon the mind of the reader. If this is unclear, I hope that a proper dichotomy will lay it plain. Group the first. The knives for one who has received no training in the history or nature of the Elder Scrolls. The scroll itself is effectively inert. No prophecy can be scryed, nor knowledge obtained, while the scroll will not impart learning to the uninformed, nor will it afflict them in any adverse fashion. Visually, the scroll will appear to be awash in odd lettering and symbols. Those who know their astronomy often claim to recognize constellations in the patterns and connections, but such conjecture is impossible to further investigate, since the very nature of this study necessitates unlearned subjects. Group the second. So the first group is people that don't know anything about the scrolls, don't know the language it was written in, don't know anything about them, and they basically can't tell anything. People that know astronomy think they see constellations, but it doesn't even affect them. Group the second, the unguarded intellects. It is this second group that realizes the greatest danger from attempting to read the scrolls. These are subjects who have an understanding of the nature of the Elder Scrolls and possess sufficient knowledge to actually read what is inscribed there. They have not, however, developed adequate discipline to stave off the mind-shattering effect of having a glimpse of infinity. These unfortunate souls are struck immediately, irrevocably, and completely blind. So literally blind, sight they cannot see. Such is the price for overreaching one's faculties. It bears mentioning, though, that with the blindness also comes a fragment of that hidden knowledge. Whether the future, the past, or the deep natures of being is dependent on the individual and their place in the greater spheres. But the knowledge does come. Group the third. Mediated understanding, alone in Tamriel. It would appear that only the cult of the ancestor moth. Okay, so that's, I think, Fort Moon Moth, and I might be saying that wrong. Maybe the name of that fort is different. That's the blind monks I mentioned earlier, though. That's where they were. Cult of the ancestor moth has discovered the discipline to properly guard one's mind when reading the scrolls. Their novitiates must undergo the most rigorous mental cultivation, and they often spend a decade or more at the monastery before being allowed to read their first Elder Scroll. So they spend 10 years before they even get to read one. The monks say this is for the initiate's own protection, as they must have witnessed many unguarded intellects among their more eager ranks. With appropriate fortitude, these readers also receive blindness, though at a far lesser magnitude than the unguarded. Their vision fogs slightly, but they retain shape, color, and enough acuity to continue to read mundane text. The knowledge they gain from the scroll is also tempered somewhat. It requires stages of meditation and reflection to fully appreciate and express what one saw. Interesting. Group the fourth, the final group. Illuminated understanding. Between the previous group and this one exists a continuum that has at present only been traversed by the monks of the ancestor moth. With continued readings, the monks become gradually more and more blind, but receive greater and more detailed knowledge. As they spend their waking hours pondering the revelations, they also receive a further degree of mental fortitude. There is, for every monk, a day of penultimate reading, when the only knowledge the Elder Scroll imparts is that the monk's next reading shall be his last. Wow, interesting. For each monk, the penultimate reading comes at a different and unknowable time. Preliminary work has been done to predict the occurrence by charting the severity of an individual monk's blindness. But all who reach these later stages report that the increasing blindness seems to taper with increased readings. Some pose the notion that some other unseen sense is, in fact, continuing to diminish at this upper range, but I shall leave such postulations to philosophers. So they think that in addition to them becoming blind, they start losing something else, like feeling or smell or something, I don't know. To prepare for his ultimate reading, a monk typically withdraws to seclusion in order to reflect upon a lifetime of revelations and appoint his mind for reception of his last. Upon this final reading, he is forever blinded, as sure as those unguarded ones who raced to the knowledge. The illuminated one, though, has retained his understanding over a lifetime, and typically possesses a more integral notion of what has been revealed to him. It is hoped that this catalogue will prove useful to those who wish to further our mortal understanding of the Elder Scrolls. The moth priests remain aloof about these matters, taking the gradual debilitation that comes with reading as a point of pride. May this serve as a useful starting point for those hoping to take up such study. Dictated to Anstius Mecham, fourth of last seed, in the 126th year of the second era. So the second era is before Morrowind even. And I'm going to take that book in case I need it. Alright, so that concludes the books. I'll try to summarize right as we get back into the main video. And I got to think about what that summary is, because they didn't really tell me a whole lot. They kind of just told me the book is some crazy stuff, and there are varying degrees of how it affects people. Alright, so back to the video.